on Shantae. Oh god. WayForward, perhaps most famous for not being famous for any one game, took to Kickstarter for Shantae Half-Genie Hero back in September 2013, and with a release date right around the corner, probably, maybe, it's time we take a look back on the Kickstarter and ask ourselves why this sentence hasn't stopped yet. Shantae, as a series, has always been interesting in so much as there's nothing really interesting about it. It's a 2D platforming series that's pretty good, has always flown under the radar as a cult series, but not on the same level as Shenmue or Beyond Good and Evil kind of cult hit. Shantae is a strange series. It debuted in 2002 in the Game Boy Color and was a fairly generic, if well-made 2D platformer that fell into obscurity for a long time. Actually, it's made a ton of lists for best games on the system and got good reviews when it came out. It's one of the few series to have a female protagonist of color though, so that's nice. That's really all there was to say about it for about 8 years, but seemingly out of nowhere, WayForward and Nintendo announced a sequel in 2010 for the DSi of all things, and renewed interest in the franchise. There were going to be 2 more sequels before that, but they were both cancelled. We're a crowdfunding site though, so we don't really care about those 2 games, and we wouldn't really care about the third either if not for the circumstances behind it, but say it with me, we'll come back to that later, yeah. Launched in September 2013, WayForward was seeking $400,000 to bring Shantae back with Shantae Half-Genie Hero, totally free of Nintendo, even though they've never published it themselves, the original publisher Capcom, and giving themselves total creative freedom. The original director of the first Shantae, Matt Bozon, was still at WayForward, as were a few others who worked on the game, and they were all coming back for this. WayForward's opening gambit touches on what I alluded to earlier. Despite being around since 1990, WayForward really isn't known for anything. That's because they're always working on licensed games like Thor, the Smurfs, SpongeBob, Space Chimps, and I could go on. As you'd expect, most of it's crap, but to be fair, they also did the DuckTales remake and A Boy and His Blob. Shantae is one of only a few original IPs they own, and in 2013 they saw it as their chance to finally break free. In all that time, fan letters, support emails, and interviewers have made our most frequently asked question, why don't you guys make more original games? Kickstarter allows us to do just that. With your help, we can create a large-scale multi-console game that's well beyond our usual self-publishing budgets. Well, not really. They still pump out a lot of that stuff, releasing 8 games in 2015 alone, but this is a positive episode, so we're going to ignore that. Stay positive. Anyway, they go on to explain Shantae in greater detail than I have so far. Who is Shantae? Why, she's the star of our game! She's a human-genie hybrid, a half-genie, who hair-whips monsters with her ponytail and belly dances to transform into magical creatures. She explores Sequin Land, solves labyrinths, trashes epic bosses, and foils the busty buccaneer Risky Boots, always managing to save the day. She's been featured in 3 daring adventures, all designed exclusively for Nintendo handhelds. Now Shantae's headed for the living room, but her core gameplay elements will remain intact. Yeah, it's the kind of thing you'd expect, a 2D platformer with some light story elements and a great art style. I mean, just look at it, it's gorgeous. That's my art critique. Anyway, much like the Ouya before it, Half-Genie Hero's Kickstarter page is surprisingly slender in terms of content. After a brief section about the team, and I mean only 1 sentence per person, and many are just referred to by their team, there are the stretch goals, a section about WayForward's other games, some history about the Shantae series, clunkily buried near the bottom of the page for some reason, and the FAQ at the very bottom. The first question kind of points to why there isn't much information about Half-Genie Hero itself. How far into development is this game? Is what we're seeing final? We're currently in pre-production. Everything you see here is an early proof of concept. We have not gone into full development on this game, but we'd love to. The Kickstarter pitch video is a gameplay trailer though, different from most pitches that feature the developers talking on camera to fill time. Being in pre-production with not much to show isn't such a huge problem when you have gameplay and a long history like WayForward does. Still, that might explain why Shantae had such a rough start. The campaign launched on September 4th, and according to KickTrack, it didn't get fully funded until the 23rd, despite being featured on all the big gaming sites, like Clickist for example. After the usual spike following a project success, it closed not long after on October 4th with over $770,000. If they at least had a little more to show or talk about, then they probably could have gotten more, but they more than made up for it with all the updates they posted. They wrote 37 updates from the start to the end of the Kickstarter, including at least one every day and sometimes even 2 a day. Some people might find that annoying, especially if you opt into email notifications, but it's great to see a developer take initiative to keep adding content and keep backers and potential backers in the loop. Topics range from... you know what? We can't ignore the elephant in the room any longer. Half-Genie Hero came at an interesting time, shall we say, for WayForward and Kickstarter. Half-Genie Hero is the 4th game in the series, not the 3rd. That would fall to Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, which was announced a year before the Kickstarter to Half-Genie Hero appeared. Unlike those other games in the series WayForward worked on, this wasn't cancelled, and released in 2014 and published by themselves. Not only that, but the second game, Risky's Revenge, came to the PS4 in 2015 and the Wii U in 2016. Then there is of course all the licensed games WayForward churns out on a consistent basis. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's foolish to look at a Kickstarter from the outside and make determinations about whether it's necessary or not. But in certain circumstances, it's worth asking, why is this on Kickstarter? As much as I was saying Shantae was a cult game earlier, WayForward wasn't having any problems publishing their own sequel or developing an HD version of the second game. Would it be such a stretch to say that WayForward should be using the profits from those 2 games, plus all their usual license stuff, to fund Half-Genie Hero? Well, I found an interview with Matt Bozon on GoNintendo.com talking about why they needed to use Kickstarter. His response is a little on the lengthy side, but it sheds a lot of light on the situation. Well, our business is based on contract work, which constitutes 95% of our total business over the last 23 years. Our goal since day one was always been to make original titles, but in all that time we've only been able to self-fund 8 games, each a labor of love that takes a backseat to our day job. So far, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is the largest self-funded endeavor we've attempted, and it's been a real stretch. To make the HD Shantae game that fans are asking for, we would need to either give up the rights to a publisher in exchange for the funding, or give Kickstarter a try. The choice was easy, but the work wasn't. We ended up funding a large amount of pre-production to get to the demo phase, the parts you see in the Kickstarter video. It took several months to get there, and cost as much as one of our handheld games. I'm not saying WayForward has done anything wrong, but this is a bit of a head-scratcher. It's almost as if they're implying that they aren't making any money on Shantae HD or Pirate's Curse at all, which is a damn shame if true. At the same time, I have to wonder what's really going on. Again, I'm an outsider, I don't know what I'm talking about, but how can this be? Indie developers that don't have the luxury of making licensed games for income are able to make equally elaborate games and find a ton of success. I know Shantae has never been on the same level as, Papers, Please or Octodad in terms of sales or popularity, but even if Shantae represents a monetary loss, surely all those licensed games can make up for it, especially if you're able to turn out 8 a year. It might sound like I'm crapping on WayForward, but in truth, it's the other way around. What does it say about the games industry that a developer that's been around for 2 decades, who's made 200 licensed games, of varying quality admittedly, needs to use Kickstarter to fund a sequel to a relatively successful franchise? WayForward should be rolling in so much cash, especially after their DuckTales remaster game, that they should be able to make 3 or 4 Shantae games with ease. I'm not sure if it's WayForward's fault for spending too much, or the game industry as a whole for creating this situation, but this is exactly why I love Kickstarter so much. It saves us from terrible situations like this, and it gets the games we want to play in our hands. In truth, I might not have much to say about Shantae, but this Kickstarter has been a great situation for everybody.